It is Tuesday, July 15th. Hello and welcome to The Signal. I'm Bernice Hillier in Corner Brook, filling in for Adam Walsh. Today on The Signal, it is a gardening day. We are all ready to take your questions. Dan Rubin is our guest in studio today, so start calling now. All right, well, let's get those calls coming in. The numbers to call for the gardening show today, 1-800-563-8255 or 709-772-7111. And we're also going to give you the number to text to the show today, 709-327-8206. And I did give the wrong number, actually. There I realized I said 772. So let me give those numbers again. The number to call in, 709-722-7111. We don't want anyone calling the wrong number, especially probably annoying whoever does own that other phone number. 1-800-563-8255 from anywhere in Newfoundland and Labrador. You can text us as well with your questions, 709-327-8206, or you can send us an email, thesignal@cbc.ca. Dan Rubin is in our St. John studio today to help you with your garden. He is an experienced, longtime gardener. He is an author, and he's the founding chairperson of the Food Producers Forum in this province. Good afternoon, Dan.
Hey, good afternoon. Always glad to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for being willing to take questions. Well, you don't know what's going to come in when you open yourself up.
Sometimes I might even know the answer.
More often than not would be my guess. But
that would be my hope, too.
Dan, how would you describe this growing season? Obviously, where you are, I think you're in the Pooch Cove area,
Yeah.
But just generally what you're hearing from around Newfoundland and Labrador.
It's a very strange year, in my view, because it was a long, cold, wet spring. And since the weather turned, it's been very dry and very hot. I was just thinking this morning as I was out in my own garden early watering, and I'm watering every day, even though there's a water restriction in Pooch Cove. I have to keep the plants alive. So I minimize the watering by watering in the morning when there's less evaporation. And I was thinking of my friends Laurie and Boyd who farm in Norris Point, and I remembered that 2 years ago or 3 years ago, they had a drought. And I was thinking I should give them a call because things are so dry now that I have plants that I come out in the afternoon and they're wilted and I water them. And 20 minutes later, they spring back to life. There's obviously dryness right down to the roots of the plants. So it's an interesting year, but it always is.
And I mean, what does that do to the growing season, though, when you have, as you said, plants that are dry right down to their roots?
Well, the long, cold, wet spring delayed planting. I even have an old-timer, older than me, who's a neighbor, and they've planted their potatoes late this year by 2 or 3 weeks because of the weather that was cold. And now it's so dry that when plants get that dry that they wilt, they suffer. So it cuts back on the food production, that's for sure, and the flowering and fruiting. So that's the story.
My goodness. Do you recall a growing season like this since you've been growing in Newfoundland and Labrador?
It's always strange, but the thing is that I don't remember exactly the same year. We've had some really long, hot summers that were great for growing, but broken up by bouts of rain. And when I say rain, I don't mean the little sprinkles that we've been getting in the last 2 weeks, because those don't do much. We need a good soaking rain to get down into the soil and water not only the plants but the trees. I have fruit trees. I have 27 fruit trees in my little backyard, and I'm noticing the difference in the cherry production. Half the cherries are falling off the tree because even with the deep roots that the tree has, it is also noticing the dryness.
We've been keeping a really close eye. We have a community garden plot this year for the first time, my husband and I, and we've been keeping an eye on the forecast. And I'm thinking that when you see a chance of showers in the forecast or 2 to 4 millimeters of rain expected, that's inconsequential.
It really doesn't do the job, and so you do have to supply water. You have to irrigate, and gardeners and farmers, we're used to doing that, providing water, but it's extreme this year, frankly.
I remember 2020 was maybe one of those years you're talking about where the weather was hot, but we still got enough rain.
Yeah, that was a great year. I got tons of food. I think 65 pounds of plums off of the 2 plum trees that I planted many years ago, and great production of carrots and onions and garlic, all of that. And I do have that coming along. We had a great harvest of broccoli and a great harvest of the flowering scapes on the garlic, which you take off to increase the size of the garlic bulb. One of my favorite foods, garlic scapes. But I'm keeping a close eye on things. The tomatoes love this, as long as you keep them watered. And the squash are growing and all that. But it's a very challenging year because of the dryness.
How much rain would you like to see in the forecast? If you could tell the folks like Ashley Brawweiler how much rain we really need.
27.5 millimeters. No, I have no idea. Just enough to really soak the ground roughly on a weekly basis, because that's what we did have 2 years ago. But we're just getting sprinkles.
My goodness. Well, the numbers to call today with your questions for Dan Rubin, 1-800-563-8255 or 709-722-7111. Dan is glad to take your questions, no matter what it's about related to gardening, and he'll do his best to give you some advice. The number to text us, if you want to send a text during the show, 709-327-8206. And you can also send us an email. thesignal@cbc.ca is how you reach us that way. We did have a call, or an email, I should say, Dan, that came in with someone who was having some challenges with some bush beans in a raised bed.
Yeah.
The first pair of leaves went brown and died. Some of the plants seem to be surviving, says the writer, and bravely putting out new leaves. Others are just reduced to the central stalk. The strange thing is that not every plant in the bed was affected, and this person has 4 other beds with beans in, and they're all okay. So could it be frost? Wind damage? They're not seeing any bugs around, so just wondering if you had any insight.
Not really, because when these questions come about, these what's wrong with my plant questions, because you don't have enough information, it's very hard to answer, particularly without seeing a picture of the plant, because sometimes a picture will show that there's a particular disease. But without that image, and based on what you've just told me, it's very hard to know. It is strange that the other beds are fine. It suggests that there's something in that bed, in the soil, either a disease or very poor nutrition, which very often happens. People build raised beds and they fill it with whatever. It's really essential that you build up the soil fertility. That's why my book is titled Sun, Seed, Soil. And the soil part of it is to build rich organic soil with many organic amendments like compost and maple leaves and manure and seafood compost and, did I say compost? To feed the soil. The saying is you feed the garden and the garden feeds you. So it sounds like it's something in the soil, but it could be windburn as well. That bed could be the one where the wind whips around the corner and smacks into those. And that in combination with dryness could be the thing. But I would caution that it might be lack of water.
And what would you say about raised beds specifically, about ensuring they're getting enough water?
Well, I was just at a garden job. You can see how dirty my fingernails are. Minutes ago, working with a fine young fellow named Adam in a backyard garden on Freshwater Road. And I asked him to water in the rhubarb plants, and he went and he sprinkled water on the top. I'm not trying to take you down, Adam. We all do this. And the fact is that a raised bed, and my raised beds are 3x7, so 20 square foot, needs a full minute of water. I mean, count from 1 to 60, or use your watch, folks. Time it, because when you see the water soaking the surface, that doesn't mean it's down underneath, reaching the roots of the plants. So a good minute or two of water, and in this dry weather, I would double that. I would say 2 or 3 minutes of soaking the bed, and doing that in this weather almost daily. Normally, it would be every third or fourth day.
And again, early in the morning, later in the evening?
Yeah, when there isn't hot, dry conditions because the sun is beating down, you water then, because then you're not losing a chunk of that water to evaporation. And there are some plants that don't like their leaves wet because they will get problems with mold, like tomatoes. So if you're watering your tomatoes, you tend to water down by the roots, and do that at a time when there will be some evaporation. But in this dry weather, it doesn't take long for the leaves to dry out. As long as the water doesn't sit on the tomatoes, they're fine.
My goodness. You're listening to The Signal. We are talking about gardening, and we would love to have your questions called in. So the numbers to reach Dan Rubin today here on The Signal, 1-800-563-8255 or 709-722-7111. We've had an email come in from Daryl, and it says, I recently purchased 2 bloomerang lilacs. I'm not sure if that's a typo or if that's what they are. Bloomerang lilacs is how it's worded. I'll be planting them in the next few days. What would be the best type of fertilizer to use during planting? Maybe bone meal? Any other tips that you would offer?
Bone meal, absolutely, because it promotes rooting. But again, I'm going to play my little harp here and say that I'm a big fan of organic agriculture, which means not using the 10-10-10. I do have some in my yard. I do use it when I'm planting initially, but it's very easy to over-fertilize, particularly with nitrogen. The other thing I will say about it is the bone meal and a little bit of compost, or composted seafood, or composted or sheep manure, can go in the bottom of the hole with the roots of the plants. But mostly you want to feed on top of the soil so that it soaks down in and gradually feeds. So I would recommend bone meal, and I would recommend compost or composted manure for food for your plants as you plant them.
All right. I hope that's helpful to Daryl. Thank you very much.
I've never heard of that type of lilac. I'm going to have to check it out. Yeah.
And we have another message question to you from a person who has sent to us by text. Says, hi, I love listening to the gardening show. Thanks for all your help. My question is, I sowed a few potatoes early in June, and they are up and growing.
Good.
I trenched them already, trenched them already.
Yeah.
I noticed that the stalks are really tall, and I'm wondering if they have, as folks say, all gone to stalk. Would it kill or cure to trim off the tops of the stalks a bit?
I wouldn't trim them. I would attribute that to the growing conditions this year, and in particular because you planted in June, the long wet spring. I would let them grow because all of the nutrition that's going to go down and form the potatoes is coming from the leaves. So when you remove the stalk, you remove the leaves, and you're cutting back on the growth of the plant in general. What I would do, and it's the good old lazy bed method, where you plant the potatoes and you hill them up and you hill them up. And very often people would add seaweed to feed the plants. If you've got any seaweed, add that. But just keep hilling them up. I wouldn't recommend trimming them.
So hilling them up just means kind of gathering up the soil around the base of the plants?
Yeah. If you've got rows of potatoes and you've got walking space between them, you carve out some soil where you would walk between the rows and make a big mound so that just the top of the plant is sticking up the top. Now, if you've got tall stalks, it takes more soil to do that, but there's no harm in that. And then when the potatoes form, that helps keep the potatoes underground where they don't turn green, and you don't want them turning green.
All right. I hope that's helpful advice. We have another person who has texted in to say, is there anything I can spray on my lettuce to stop the bugs from eating it before I get a chance to pick it?
Yes, seawater once a week. Spraying seawater or sprinkling it from a watering can will do wonderful work. I learned that from a neighbor down the road who's growing the most incredibly large and gorgeous cabbages. And right up the hill where I live, I've got to use netting to keep the white butterflies from laying the eggs that turn into the cabbage worms, as they're called. And this guy was growing these huge cabbages. I said, what do you do? He told me, I go down to the chuck and I get some seawater and I sprinkle it on once a week. So try seawater. Do not use any pesticides. You really don't want that on your food, although there are organic pesticides and biological alternatives like something called BTK, which is a bacterium that can affect insects. But I would try the saltwater trick. And if you're not close to the ocean and you can't get it, then you do a mix, the same as you would for pickles, of the right amount of salt in the right amount of water. And you can find out what that is for making pickles online.
Okay, I was going to ask you, what about for those of us who don't live near the ocean and that's a little bit prohibitive? That sounds like a good solution and one that's natural. We have another text question from Dion. Hi, love the show. Do you have any tips for growing green gage plum trees, in particular avoiding black knot?
Yes, I do, because I have two Italian plum trees, and I've learned from them how to deal with the black knot. So before I get into the black knot, though, let me talk about planting fruit trees. So the common wisdom is that when you're planting a fruit tree, like one of the ones you get from the nurseries, in its pot, you take it out of the pot. Sometimes it's in a burlap wrap. You dig a hole twice as big as the pot, you plunk it in the ground, and then mostly what people do is think, well, I've got to feed the tree. So they put a bunch of really good fertilizer and manure down in the hole with the tree, and then they cover it over, and then they forget to water it. Well, first of all, trees newly planted need water every day. And secondly, when you don't remove the burlap, you're telling the tree roots not to grow. So you definitely want to take that burlap off. In fact, some advice I've heard, which I think is good, is to wash the roots with a strong hose spray and make sure you can spread them out in the bottom of the hole. And what you do when you're planting a fruit tree, and I learned this from a wonderful orchardist in Ontario named Stefan Sobkowiak, Sobkowiak. You can search him out online. He's brilliant. Is that you do not put the good stuff in the hole with the roots of the tree, because it delivers a message to the tree that the roots don't need to grow. Everything it needs is right there. And so they don't grow, right? They stay put because the food's there. So what you want to do is dig a hole, yes, twice as big as the pot the tree came in, sort out the roots and spread them out over a mound of soil in the bottom, and then fill in the hole with exactly the same dirt, sand, rock, gravel that came out of it. You want the drainage, and you do not want to feed the tree. A little bit of bone meal for rooting, that's fine, but basically nothing else in the hole. And then you top dress around the trunk of the tree with the good stuff, and it seeps in with water and with the rain and feeds the tree, and then the roots go out wide looking for it. And as a tree grows, and I have plum trees that are 8 years old, the crown of the tree gets really wide, 5, 6 feet wide. And you need to know that you don't feed that tree close to the trunk, because the feeder roots are now out at the limit of growth of the top of the tree, mirroring it underground. So you feed along the drip line at the outside of the tree. Now, back to the black knot. The pin cherries, cherry trees, the ones we call drupes, that's the family of peaches, plums, cherries, nectarines, tend to get this black knot, which is present in the surrounding trees and the wild plants. And it's an incrustation that forms on the branches of the tree. It looks really gnarly and ugly and black or brown. What I've learned about my fruit trees, my plum trees, is that if I prune it out If I see a limb that has the black knot in it, I clip that limb off at the base. I do not burn it because burning it will spread the spores. It's a fungal disease. I cut it up, I put it in a bag, and it goes out with the garbage. I do not bury it, and I do not burn it. So if you do that in a consistent way, year by year, you just keep pruning out the black knot, you'll have a healthy tree, and you'll have good plums. But you have to keep on it year after year.
Now, is there a way to avoid it entirely? Because this person isn't saying they've got a problem with it necessarily, but kind of concerned about a problem with it.
Okay, it's a fungal disease that infests trees in that family. The spores are blown in the wind. If you're anywhere near wild land where there are pin cherries or other trees around that carry it, in all likelihood you'll have it show up. If you're at a good distance, like out in the middle of the forest, you probably won't have it. But the best thing is to be prepared. And one more note about this. There is an even worse disease than black knot called fire blight that can affect fruit trees and it can affect dogberries, and it's spread directly from tree to tree. So when you're doing that pruning with a hand cutters or a cutter with long handles, after you do that cutting out of any branches in pruning, you soak those tools, the blades, in bleach or alcohol to prevent it from spreading. You do not use unclean tools for pruning. That's a tip.
Wow. It's so tricky, and there's so much to think about, and you can see why people make, novice errors, I guess, in just not understanding everything that you just explained.
It's the same thing for me. It's a learning curve. We're all learning as we go, and there's so much to know, and much of that traditional knowledge has been lost from between generations, and we're bringing it back. When I get a chance, I want to mention some of the work being done by food producers because there's some fantastic things going on. But that organization is an information hub, has a beautiful website at Food Producers Forum, FORUM.com, and it's an online gardening encyclopedia because we all have so much to learn. It's a constant. It never ends.
We have another email that's come in from Maureen, and she says, hi, I dug up some of my garlic yesterday because they were all brown. When I dug them, the bulbs were surrounded by wee little worms. There was no covering on the garlic, and the cloves were starting to split. What did I do wrong?
You didn't do anything wrong. It's just that for some reason in that soil or in the garlic that you originally planted, you had a pest that is attacking your garlic. And the best advice I can say is that you probably did the right thing to harvest right now and get the best of what you have. Don't replant that garlic or order new. Music is a really good variety. You can order it early from Vessey's and other sources, or from Fixed Seed here in Torbay, Flat Rock actually. And just plant fresh in fresh ground next year. And garlic is a heavy feeder, so you're going to want to move where you grow it. I'd be curious to know, Maureen, if you planted the same garlic in the same spot year after year. That could have developed problems. That's one of the reasons for rotating what you plant from place to place, from bed to bed each year.
Interesting. Must be so disappointing after you put so much effort into a bed.
Yeah. Well, one of the tricks that I've learned is going on at this time of year during the food fishery. It's not very convenient timing because the garlic's already planted last fall, but there will be a gap between harvesting the garlic in late summer and planting new garlic, hardneck garlic, in the fall. And if I can get my hands on a bucket of fish heads, I'm going to keep it around. She won't be pleased, but I'll keep it at the back of the yard. And then before I plant that garlic, I'm going to dig a trench about 1.5 feet deep, and I'm going to put that fish stuff at the bottom and cover it. And then I'm going to plant garlic over it, about 9 inches higher. And I will get garlic when I do that the size of my fist.
Wow.
Garlic is a heavy feeder. It needs lots of nitrogen.
Wow.
Yeah.
You are listening to The Signal. We're at
I hope
about...
that's helpful, Maureen. Sorry.
And if Maureen has any other questions, she can follow up certainly and send us, an email as well if she has any answers or responses to what Dan has just had to say. Our guest in studio today is Dan. He is a well-known and experienced gardener, author, and founding chairperson of the Food Producers Forum, which he just mentioned. And once again, the website is foodproducersforum.com. And if you want to call in and talk to Dan, that would be awesome. We would love to hear from you by phone. The numbers to call are 1-800-563-8255, or you can call 709-722-7111, the number to send a text, and we've been getting a bunch of those, 709-327-8206, or send us an email, thesignal@cbc.ca. Dan Rubin is standing by to take your call. We have a comment that was left by a caller who couldn't stay on the line, but says, I planted 2 apple trees 3 to 4 weeks ago and was recommended to give them a good bucket of water each every 2 days. Should that watering schedule be changed now because of the hot weather we're having?
Well, how big is your bucket? The question is that if 5 gallons of water is enough every other day in normal weather, and yes, a fruit tree newly in the ground needs to be watered basically every other day. In the hot weather we're experiencing right now, I would modify that and I would water every day. I mentioned timing the watering of a raised bed and increasing that to 2 minutes for a bed. The same thing would apply to your newly planted apple trees. They need to be soaked really well in this weather every day because evaporation is just taking half of that water away.
We had another text from a listener who wants to get some information from you, get your advice. When my son lived in Boston, he sent me pictures of trees that were planted, and they had this bag type of thing around them that was filled with water. And this water watered the tree slowly, so it didn't dry out. Is there anything you can get like that around here?
There is a thing, a ceramic pot that has a small opening. It's like a vase. It's called an olla or olla in Spanish. And what you do with these pots is you bury them up to their necks in the ground, and you fill them periodically with water every time they're empty. And the water seeps out through the clay, the baked clay, and slowly puts water into the soil. So there should be a way that you could do something like that. By creating a semi-permeable container. Those bags that you described your son seeing in Boston is an example of timed water release. One of the things you can do is you can get a timer. You can order these from garden stores or Lee Valley online that have a little dial that you set, and it's a timer. And it allows the water to flow through for a set amount of time. You can set it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour. And then what you do every day is you just come out and you go clink, 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 and you let it water, and then it turns itself off. And that way you can do a daily soak because, again, we're talking about the weather. In this kind of weather, you need to provide a consistent amount of water. But there might be ways to fill something with water in the soil or on the top of the soil that slowly releases it. Yeah. And then there is hoses with little tiny holes and that are laid out along garden beds and that do drip irrigation. That's another variation on the same idea of slow watering. Good idea.
Interesting. We have a caller on the line. It's Alberta calling in from Gould's today. Good afternoon, Alberta.
Oh, good afternoon.
Hi, how are you doing?
Oh, good. And how are you today?
As I said, I've got grit under my fingernails. I was working in a backyard here doing a garden design, and I'll be happy to be home in my garden later, but I'm very happy to be here and to speak to you. So what do you have to say or ask about Alberta?
I have gooseberry plants, shrubs, and every year they are totally eaten by sawfly larvae.
Sawfly.
And I'm wondering now, I know that in the UK you can get nematodes that appear But here it's like, I tried BTK, that didn't work at all.
Jeez.
Tried soapy water, also didn't work. And they regrow their leaves, but they're just, I'm sure it's impacting their ability to bear because I'm seeing next to nothing in the way of fruit.
Yeah, the sawfly is ferocious. We never had it until one year we brought in some mulch, and sure enough, there was sawfly in the mulch. And within like one day, this entire stand, this long row of gooseberries, lovely gooseberries, was decimated. The leaves were gone. How many years has this been going on in your gooseberry patch?
Oh, 3 years, ever since I planted them.
Wow. So it sounds like when you planted them without realizing it, you brought them in the soil because they overwinter in the soil. It might be an idea to do something to try and wipe out the immature forms down in the soil. I don't know what that would be because you've tried the BTK, which, as I mentioned, is the Bacillus thuringiensis that can affect insects, and that didn't work. There's the need for some other approach, and I'm not sure what to suggest. One thing, I know this is a bizarre idea, but you could try this. You could try waiting till the winter time and do a diluted bleach solution and pour that down into the soil because it's not going to hurt the plants. Again, not strong bleach, but like you would put in, like the smell of a swimming pool with bleach in it. So perhaps a half cup of bleach in a gallon or like 4 liters of water, or in a 5-gallon bucket, I would put in a half cup of bleach, mix it, and then water around the plants with that. Not now, but going into the late fall, and see if you can take out the immature forms of the sawfly. That's a crazy idea. That's my suggestion because I really don't know what else to do. It's horrible when that happens. We lost our gooseberries in the same way.
Yeah, I was actually a desperation move, thinking about digging them up and washing the roots.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't do it because
but I thought that might kill them too.
No, that wouldn't work simply because where the sawfly larvae hide, or eggs or larvae, is in the soil. So that's why I'm suggesting a soak of the soil with dilute bleach might be enough to knock them back. I've never heard. That's just an original idea because I'm grasping. I don't know. But washing the roots alone would not do it. Yeah.
Wouldn't.
I would suggest one thing. Get a hold of the people at the Botanical Garden here in St. John's. Talk to Tim Walsh. Talk to Scott and see if they might have suggestions because they're far more knowledgeable than I am.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they might be.
I noticed. No. Sorry. I noticed, I was at the Botanical Gardens, well, I've been there several times, of course, and I noticed that they have some beautiful gooseberries out there, and I'm just so envious because leaves, perfect.
Perhaps they would know. I spent a lovely afternoon just a couple of days ago with my dear friend Ross Travers, who you all will know, the grand person of the gardening scene here. And if I get a chance to talk to him, I'll ask him. And I'll post it on Backyard Homesteading and Farming.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Alberta, thanks very much for calling in. Dan, we've heard back from Maureen. She was listening in as you were talking about her garlic, and she just wanted you to know, yes, it is the same bed as previous years and the same garlic, and she mentions music specifically. Yeah. I think that's what you had mentioned. So again, that's good information, and it helps us sort this out because the pest you're seeing has been building up in the soil, and because you did not move your garlic to another bed, two things happened. The soil was depleted of nitrogen, so the garlic was not as healthy as it would be in fresh soil or well-fed soil. And secondly, the pests were waiting. So strong recommendation, start over with new seed garlic from Fixed Seed here in Flat Rock, or from a garden shop, or from Vessie's online. Order it early because they sell out.
and music is the variety to grow here, number one type.
I want to give the numbers again. I'm glad we had a call, but the numbers to call to ask Dan directly the questions that you have for him, 1-800-563-8255 or 709-722-7111. Here's a question we had from Sarah by way of text. She says, great gardening show. Hoping you can tell me what is going on with my cucumber plants. They are in the greenhouse, and all the cucumber plants are affected with these white spots.
That's generally a sign of mold, but it's very normal that the cucumbers have those white spots. So squash plants in general, in that family, the cucurbits, talking about, melons, cucumbers, that family, can get that on the leaves, but I wouldn't be worried about it. The only possible thing that could be indicated is that you're overwatering. But again, in this weather, how can you overwater? Like my cucumbers get dry even if I water daily. So, and they're growing in containers. I don't know if yours are in a bed or in containers, but I wouldn't worry about the white spots.
Okay, that's
that
good to know.
Seems quite normal. Yeah.
Thank you very much to Sarah for that question. We've had a question come in about this intriguing idea that you have mentioned about salt water.
Sure.
So the person says, does the saltwater application work with other small seeds such as turnip, carrots, beet, onions?
Well, here's some backstory on why it works so well with cabbage. And the reason is, and I've got a little chart in my book showing how this is happened. All of the cabbage family plants that we know and grow, cabbages, kale, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, they all came from a single plant. They evolved from a wild plant called Brassica oleracea, and that plant evolved at the seashore. So it is adapted to deal with salt. So that's one of the reasons why sprinkling the salt water on the cabbages works. It might discourage some of the other plants like carrots or turnips from growing, but it has to do with how much you use. Again, we're not washing the plant or sluicing the plant with salt water. We're just sprinkling it from a water can, because when that salt water meets up with the insect or the caterpillar, it burns. And that's why it works. So I wish I knew the name of the neighbor who was growing the cabbages down the road. He doesn't live on my road, but he's a local. He's a livier from Pooch Cove. And I learned that valuable lesson from him. And I would thank him if I saw him again. Yeah.
Dan, you've mentioned your book a couple of times, so I want to give people the title. It is published by Boulder Books.
Yes.
It's called Sun, Seed, and Soil, Tips and Techniques for a Northern Garden. It's by our own guest here today, Dan Rubin, so you can purchase it, I guess, through Boulder, but probably in bookstores as well.
Well, COVID. Blame COVID. See, before COVID hit in about 2019, 2020, I was holding annual spring workshops in Pooch Cove called Creating the Year-Round Garden. And I held that again for the first time this year. I had so much fun, 3 sessions, 45 people, and we met at the Mercy Center on Mount Scio. And I would, talk like I'm talking now about things that I've learned and things that I'm curious about. And it was always such a wonderful exchange with everybody who came to these workshops. And over the years, I've done presentations to 2,500 people. But COVID came, and I couldn't do my workshops, and I'm a retired teacher, and I need to talk. So I sat down, and I put the details of the workshop into the book. And the reason the book is called Sun, Seed, and Soil is that those are the basics things that we attend to. And our mistake is thinking that we're in charge. That's the great human mistake, is forgetting that we're part of the natural world. And when we remember that and we go out into the garden with that awareness, we're the nursemaids. We're the helpers. We're not in charge. So what do plants need? They need sun. They need warmth. They need the right variety for our climate. That's the seed part. And they need wonderful, rich, organic soil. So in the book, I talk about that, but I also get into how do you grow the tomatoes and what types of tomatoes to grow and all that stuff. Yeah, and it was fun writing it, and I had a wonderful editor, Stephanie, at Boulder, and a great publisher, and it's a beautiful book. I'm very proud of it.
All right, so look for that, Sun, Seed, and Soil by Dan Rubin, our guest today. And we've had an email from Janice and William Jenkins. They say, great show. We have a 30-year-old lilac, 20 feet in height. Not sure if you'd call it a tree or a shrub. It has multiple trunks, but we did not get blooms this year. There are lots of suckers coming out of the ground near the base of the tree. How do you know what to prune, when to prune? There are branches that look like they are dead, but when you try to trim, they seem healthy as they are difficult to cut.
They may be difficult to cut, but if they're not bearing leaves, they're probably older wood. And I would cut them out right down to where they branch or right down to the soil to give the new shoots space and light. That's an amazing age to have a lilac. And sometimes when these bushes and trees get older, they run out of food. So you might consider fertilizing around the drip line of the tree, as I mentioned. And the fertilizing could be done with chemical fertilizers or with, even better, with organic fertilizers dug in. And there are spikes you can buy to feed the trees that you pound in, and then they disseminate fertilizer. So I would recommend pruning the ones, the branches that are not looking lively, to give new growth a chance, and feeding your lilac. When I was visiting my friend Ross Travers, he pointed out to me a rhododendron that he planted 50 years ago, that is 30 feet high and 30 feet wide.
Incredible.
And covered with blooms, yeah.
Incredible. We have an email from Ted Lemoyne, and he says, a faithful listener, loves the show, seeking advice. This spring, I pruned a mature apple tree in the backyard. I now have a lot of water shoots.
Yep.
How do I know which water shoots have to be removed?
The general rule of thumb with water shoots is to remove all of them. They're not necessarily going to turn into valid branches. They're a reaction to your pruning. And it's interesting. One of the things about pruning is that there's two kinds of pruning. There's summer pruning and winter pruning. Starting with winter pruning, that's a pruning you do just before things bud out and begin to set flowers and then leaves. And when you do that, that encourages growth. So that could be what you did. And now here come the water shoots. Water sprouts. And then there's summer pruning, when you prune and you tell the tree, don't grow there. So that's what you want to do, and this is not a bad time to do it. Again, clean your pruning tools every time you use them, to take them away, but leave enough new growth in terms of major branches that the tree can begin to spread out. And you know, the rules of thumb for pruning are remove diseased wood, remove crossed branches, and then open up the middle of the tree to the light and the wind so that the sun and the wind can get into the tree for health.
All right. I hope that's helpful to you, Ted, and thanks very much for that question. The numbers to call if you want to reach us by phone, you've got about 10 minutes to get those calls in. 1-800-563-8255 or 709-722-7111. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I jump in here? And I won't take more than a minute, but I want to share with the listeners, because I try and do this each time that I'm on, a bit of an update on the work being done by Food Producers Forum. If you don't know of our group, I'm not surprised. We've only really been on the go for about 5 years. We are a provincial nonprofit group, and we operate as an information hub to connect people who are growing plants and producing food. And our mission is to promote that so that we can return to food sovereignty and food security in our province. And the last 2 years have been amazing. I stepped down as chair 2 years ago to head a project called the Provincial Food Network. And the project generated almost $500,000 and supported 15 sites right across the province that included Indigenous communities, community gardens, family farms, and education centers, including your wonderful Western Environment Center out in Corner Brook. I'm saying hi to Katie. And what we managed to do was create a group that is so enthusiastic that they're getting ready to launch a provincial nonprofit cooperative called the Provincial Food Network, and it will be a community service co-op, and all of you listeners will be welcome to join. Look for the announcements online, because that will be the network that will provide the foundation for connecting people to restore local food. And I'm so excited about it.
I'm glad you took the time, and I'm glad you mentioned Katie. Katie Temple here at the Western Environment Center has been a big help to us as we've had our first community garden plot.
She's wonderful.
This summer. Let's see. We do have somebody calling in, I believe. I'm not sure if we have that caller ready to go just yet, but let's get to another question in the meantime. Another question about garlic for you, Dan. They seem to be growing well, but wondering when I should pick them. I have already picked the garlic scapes.
Yep.
And the leaves are starting to become a bit brown.
Perfect. Perfect timing for that question. Garlic, I don't know if you know this, but the Chinese have a saying about garlic. They say, garlic is as good as 10 mothers, because it's so good for you. It's good for your health, and it's an antibiotic. Okay, so when do you harvest your garlic? You harvest it in late summer in weather that allows you to fully cure and dry it in the sun. And that can vary from year to year. This year, that time will come early. And you harvest the garlic when the bottom 2 sets of leaves have fully turned brown. And you pull the garlic out of the ground. You do not wash it, because that can put spores for mold into the garlic. You dry it in the sun, turning it over as if you were baking it in the sunlight until you get the hard skin over the garlic bulb. You brush that off, and then you hang it in a warm, dry place indoors. I've actually built a rack with strands of wood that I can slot the garlic between, with the bulbs on top and the tails hanging down, and you let it go fully dry. If you do not dry it, it will go moldy over the winter, and then you can store it. So I would say if your leaves are starting to turn brown, you're probably maybe 2 weeks away from harvest. That would be my guess. But without seeing the garlic, I can't tell. But when the bottom 2 sets of leaves are fully brown, it's time to pull the garlic.
Okay, that's helpful information. And we do have a couple of callers on the line, so we're going to have to
What
quickly...
a great day for questions. I love this.
It has been. It's been steady, for sure. We have Jacqueline on the line. Jacqueline, good afternoon. What's your question for Dan?
Good afternoon, Bernice. Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Could you recommend an algicide? I have a corner of my asphalt in the garden that doesn't get a lot of sun.
Yeah.
And it got the algae. Now, I did a little research, and I was going to try this, see what you think of it. I was going to use vinescence and baking soda.
I'm not a big fan of killing things. I'm sorry to tell you that. So these questions of how do you kill the weeds, how do you kill the algae, I don't know. I think you could try strong vinegar in water.
That's what vinescence is, honey.
Okay, there you go. That probably will work. Yeah, and I understand your need to keep things neat, and you don't want the algae there. So I would try that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's like the concentrated brown vinegar that you dilute to get brown vinegar.
Yeah, the mother of vinegar, they call it. What you want to do is just make it unpleasant for the algae to be growing there. You could try salt as well, but the vinegar is probably a good bet.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to try. That not working. Any other ideas? If that doesn't come.
No, it's just not my thing to say this is how you kill a plant. Sorry about that. I won't really apologize.
Oh, no, don't apologize. Well, okay, let me put it another way. How do I cohabitate?
How you what?
Cohabitate.
With it? Good question. I would say that what you're looking at there is a damp spot in the shade, and there are plants that would like to grow there. hostas.
This is asphalt, honey. This is
I know that.
asphalt.
I hear you. I got that image in my mind.
Okay.
So if you don't want to grow something there in a container, for example, you could do that, and then shade out what's underneath. You see, a square container that takes up that space, fill it with soil and plant a hosta in it. What about that?
Jacqueline, we're going to have to let you go. We've got another caller on the line. Thanks very much for calling in.
Thank you.
And we have Shayna on the line. Shayna, we're in a bit of a lightning round here now. So, Shayna, maybe you can give us your question and you can listen to Dan's answer over the airwaves.
That sounds perfect. Dan, I hate to say it, this is another question about killing. However, this is a weed that deserves it. Stinging nettle.
Stinging nettle is a wonderful plant. It's nutritious. It is doing a job of pulling nutrients up from deep in the soil. It makes the best fertilizer imaginable. If you pull them or cut them and put them in a bucket of water, it gets right stinky, but then it's a concentrated fertilizer for your plants. I've heard people trying to discourage them with salt, but basically you put on your gloves and you just keep pulling them, and that tends to discourage them from growing. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
That's Shayna. Thank you very much for that question. Very interesting. And Brenda, one final question from you, I believe. Brenda, what do you have for Dan today?
I've got a rhododendron, which is probably about 4 foot high. The trouble is, I shouldn't complain, but it keeps growing, and it is growing so much that it's going to be covering a window. Now, 6 weeks or so ago, I trimmed the top, and it's up again, and it really needs trimming again. So shall I really prune it right back so that there's virtually no leaves? Because I have to stop it growing.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge. I don't know enough about rhododendrons specifically, but in general at this time of the year, if you do the pruning now, it tends to discourage growth. I would be a little bit cautious about cutting too much, but if you got good growth the last time, what time of year did you trim it the last time?
I beg your pardon?
When was it that you cut it back the last time?
About 5 or 6 weeks ago.
Oh, I would call that summer pruning, except that we had such a long, wet, cold spring that you delivered the message to the plant that you wanted to continue growing. I would try trimming it now, but not cutting every single leaf off of it.
Okay, because I feel I'm just not going to get any blooms if I keep going.
That is true. You will be discouraging the blooms at the same time. But you could try cutting it back just under the level of the window and see what it does.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you for your call. I don't know if this is something you can do quickly, Dan. We had an email from Jeff in Gander who says, I have moss in my lawn, which is overtaking the grass. I've been told to apply lots of lime or tear up the entire lawn.
No, don't tear up the lawn. Lime will discourage the moss from growing. You could get dolomite lime and spread it quite thickly over it, and that will knock the moss back. But then you usually need to do something called thatching, where you take a tool and you kind of rake the dead moss out of the lawn. So those two steps, lime and raking, thatching it's called, can help pull the moss out of your lawn.
Awesome. Good to get that in. And one final question. I don't know if you can just give us a sense of what could be wrong here. A black lace elderberry that bloomed but is droopy. It's being watered well, no sign of insects.
Probably it needs more water. I know this sounds strange, but it's such a dry year that when you water, you probably aren't watering enough, because the drooping is a sign of dryness. I would say water even more and see if that helps.
All right. Dan, we have had a busy hour, and I really appreciate you being with us.
Where do they get all these people? This has been so much fun, and I'm sure glad that I could answer most of the questions.
I think you did very well. That is Dan Rubin, our guest today. He is the author of Sun, Seed, and Soil. He is also the founding chairperson of the Food Producers Forum, and he had a chance to speak with us a little bit about the coming Provincial Food Network Community Service Cooperative. So watch for that. He'll be no doubt sharing more about that in the weeks and months to come. Tomorrow on The Signal, I'm taking the show out of the studio again, heading to the port here in Corner Brook. There's a cruise ship in port visiting, and we're going to be talking about what's involved in being a cruise port, what coming ashore in Western Newfoundland means to all of those visitors, about 1,500 expected tomorrow, and what it means for Corner Brook and region as well. We'll hear from some entrepreneurs who are doing their best to take advantage of what's being offered in terms of a boost to the local economy because of the cruise ship visit. So tune in tomorrow for The Signal, live on location starting at 11:35 in most of Labrador, 12:05 in Newfoundland. I'm Bernice Hillier, broadcasting from Corner Brook, filling in for Adam Walsh. I hope you have a great day.